On my father's 65th birthday, my mother brought a special guest to the family celebration. She took the microphone, standing directly under the central chandelier of the dining room, her voice gentle but laced with something sharper. "Let's all give our congratulations," she said, "to the soulmates who've weathered over 40 years together, and are finally making it official tonight." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My father, usually so proud of his composure, went pale. He cast a quick glance toward the edge of the crowd, at Diana Whitman, his longtime mistress. Her eyes met his with a fragile hurt, like she hadn't expected this either. He instinctively frowned, then turned to look at my mother. His gaze was filled with blame. At that moment the large screen behind them lit up. A slideshow began, one photo per year, starting when my father was 35 and ending this past August. 30 snapshots in total. They unfolded like commemorative stamps marking their journey. My mother kept smiling, seasoned like a wedding MC, her tone almost theatrical as she announced, "Let's give it up for my husband Richard Moore and his one true love, Diana Whitman." The room fell deathly silent. No one spoke. I clapped a few times, almost out of instinct. My hands echoed in the quiet like an accidental firecracker. It wasn't until 3 days ago that I understood what this was all about. That day my mom had asked Dad if he wanted to take a trip to Florida with her. She'd already booked the flights and hotel. But Dad had brushed her off. "I've got a paper to finish." She didn't argue. Just turned away and started tidying up his birthday decorations in the kitchen. She pulled an old box from the closet, looking for photos to turn into a slideshow. Instead, at the bottom of the box she found a thick album she didn't recognize. She sat on the living room carpet, hands trembling, turning the pages one by one. Photo after photo. Dad and Diana watching the sunrise over the Colorado Rockies. Feeding seagulls together at the Seattle docks. Smiling side by side at a geothermal spring in Iceland. On the back of each photo a handwritten note. "To my Diana, the gentlest escape I've ever known." My mother's posture, so upright just moments before, seemed to collapse. Her eyes went hollow, her mouth curled into a smile that tried and failed to hide the heartbreak. I had never seen her that quiet. Or that alone. She stared at the pictures for a long time. Then finally, in a hoarse whisper, she asked me, "Can you tell me why?" Tears rimmed her eyes. She asked again, "Why?" "I've been asking myself the same thing ever since." Why? She was the one who stood by him when he couldn't find a job. She cooked 3 meals a day in that tiny first house and still went to night school to learn accounting so she could file his taxes. She stayed up sewing clothes and skipped every indulgence so we could go to school. She never bought herself a decent purse, but always remembered what kind of wine he liked and how he liked his steak. Her whole life she believed Mrs. Moore was a calling. And yet he loved someone else. At that moment, a memory hit me like a wave. It was a rainy afternoon. Mom was cooking dinner. I was drawing in the living room when I heard a dull thud. I ran into the kitchen. She was on the floor, lips pale, pants soaked in blood. I panicked. Didn't even put on shoes. I ran to Dad's study. He was packing for a business trip. I screamed. Mom collapsed. "She's bleeding." He froze for a second. Walked to the doorway, glanced at her, furrowed his brow, then muttered, "I'm definitely going to miss this flight." And just like that he grabbed his coat and left without looking back. My mother lost the baby at the hospital. The doctors told her plainly, and no one was there to hold her hand. She walked home from the year alone, one trembling step at a time, and then lay on the living room couch for 2 straight days. Didn't eat, didn't speak, barely moved. My father didn't come home until 2 weeks later. When he heard what had happened, he sighed, just a sigh, and said, "Rachel, how could you be so careless?" She said nothing, just looked down. Only then did he realize his words had landed like a slap. He quickly softened, tried to console her. "It's all right. We'll have more kids. Don't blame yourself. I'll carry us through no matter what." His voice was gentle. That smile of his still had the same warmth, like it always did. A smile that could convince anyone he meant what he said. And my mom, she believed him. He always had. Until 3 days ago, when she finally found out where that business trip had really taken him all those years ago. He hadn't gone for work. He'd gone to Diana. That night my mother sat alone at the dining table in silence. I approached and she handed me a photo album and a note. "Please invite her," she said. I nodded and took the yellowed collection of proof. The next morning she began putting all of this in motion. Now watching her stand under the lights, I felt a pang of sorrow. Just then my brother James leaned in and whispered sharply, "What is she doing?" The scowl on his face wasn't about our father's betrayal. It was about our mother's audacity. She looked out at the guests, her voice calm, her words like cold steel. "Diana Whitman is the woman Richard has never been able to let go of." She paused. They were apart for 6 years. But once they found each other again, they never let go. She turned to the screen behind her at the parade of travel photos. Her gaze was unreadable. "Richard's a romantic. He's taken his soulmate all over the world year after year. Every trip. Every photo. Every anniversary. Just the two of them. From the days when his hair was dark to now as it turns white, they've been acting out a love story. A decades-long play. I wasn't in it." She gave a faint smile. "And honestly, who wouldn't envy that kind of love?" "I did. I still do." Her smile sharpened, too bright to be real. "To tell the truth, trekking through mountains and oceans with him sounds a lot better than growing old alone in a kitchen, buried in grocery lists and laundry." She chuckled, but it sounded like something cracked beneath it. My father hadn't spoken yet, but James had had enough. "Mom." His voice rose like a whip across the room. "What the hell are you doing?" He was furious. "Do you have any idea what 'don't air dirty laundry in public' means?" His words sliced through the hall. Everyone turned. My father was a respected historian in the state. Published author. Conference keynote speaker. Many of the guests were his students, colleagues, even board members. He had spent a lifetime crafting the image of a devoted, gentlemanly family man. And in just a few sentences, my mother had torn that facade apart. James's fists clenched at his sides. His whole body tensed like he was about to charge the stage and snatch the mic away. He forgot the woman up there was still his mother. I sighed quietly, eyebrows drawn together. It was all unraveling. But my mother didn't even blink. She glanced at James with a cool, dismissive look, like she barely registered him. Then she picked up the microphone again, her tone steady. Too steady. "So tonight," she said, "I think I'd like to take a page from Richard's book. Maybe it's time I pursued my own happiness." She looked around the room, made eye contact with every table. "That's all I came to say." At last my father spoke, his voice tight with restrained fury. "Rachel, that's enough." He tried to lace his tone with that same old tenderness, the one that always worked on her. "Everyone's watching. Don't turn this into a spectacle. Let's go home and we can talk it through." "All right." This was his old trick. Come down from the high horse just enough, soften the edge, offer the illusion of kindness, and she would usually fold. Always had. But this time she didn't take that familiar step back. Instead, my mother reached into the pocket of her coat, pulled out a document and walked straight over to him. Calmly she handed it to him. "Sign it, Richard." My father froze. He hadn't expected her to be serious tonight, not like this. He recoiled slightly, his face turning away, expression knotted with disbelief and discomfort. "I'm not asking for a penny more than what's fair," my mother said softly. "We split everything 50-50. You can choose which house you want. I won't dig into your past, I just want a clean break." Her tone was flat, like she was reading off a bank statement. James's face drained of color. He shot up from his chair like he'd been jolted. "Mom, what the hell are you saying?" he blurted out, panicked. "Dad built all of this on his own. You don't deserve half of it." I turned to him, my voice sharp and deliberate. "James, have you lost every last bit of decency? Do you not remember how you grew up? Who raised you?" He whipped around and snapped at me, eyes burning. "All she ever did was cook and clean. What's the difference between that and a maid? She's old. She should be stepping back, not asking for a damn payout." I was about to fire back when I felt Ethan's hand tug at my sleeve. He leaned in, voice low. Don't fight. James isn't completely wrong. Just leave it." I turned to look at him, and something inside me went cold. Ethan had always been my father's protégé, brought up under his wing, well-connected in academic circles, always benefiting from being Moore's son-in-law. Not once in our marriage had he challenged my father. And now, when it really mattered, he turned his back on us as effortlessly as flipping a page. I let out a bitter laugh. "Ethan, you really are my father's star pupil. just as polished, just as hollow. Tension crackled between us. Sparks flew in our eyes. But then my mother spoke again, her voice firm and steady, slicing through the chaos. "Enough," she said. "I'll take less if that's what it takes. But this divorce agreement, you will sign it." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, silencing the entire room. Across the room I caught a glint in Diana Whitman's eyes, a flicker of hope she could barely hide. Her gaze locked on my father, like she'd been waiting for this moment to finally step into the light. If he just said yes, they'd no longer need to pretend to be just friends. But instead my father quietly took the document, then without a pause tore it in half. Then again. And again. The shredded pieces drifted to the floor like soft white ash. When he looked up there was no shame on his face. No fury. Just a dull, hollow defiance. "Rachel," he said, his voice rough and dry, "Diana is a remarkable woman. But we're just old friends. Why do you always assume the worst of me? If you're angry, then yell at me. I deserve that. But, let's not get divorced. Please." It sounded like a plea but had the posture of a speech. Diana's expression tightened, then shifted into a tight, embarrassed smile. It wasn't grace, it was pride barely covering deep, bruising disappointment. I couldn't help the soft scoff that escaped my lips. That line? That wasn't for Mom. He didn't want her back. He just didn't want to lose face. And sure enough, the crowd started to murmur. "Mrs. Moore, this has to be a misunderstanding," said a man in a suit, stepping forward like he was defusing a fire. "Diana isn't that kind of woman. Professor Moore has always spoken highly of you." "Yes, Rachel, come on now," an older woman chimed in gently. "At your age, what's the point of digging all this up?" James added with a sigh, clearly annoyed. "Mom, this is just about some trips, seriously. You're blowing this way out of proportion. If you want to travel, I'll take you next month, okay? There's no need to ruin your peace like this." Sensing the tide turning, my father jumped at the opening, pressing his advantage. "All right, Rachel," my father said, his tone condescendingly calm. "What you did to Diana tonight, accusing her like that in front of everyone, it was out of line. Just apologize to her and let's pretend none of this ever happened." My mother looked at him, her expression composed but razor-sharp. If this had been any other night, she might have done just that. She might have played along. But tonight she finally saw it clearly. Every time he extended grace, it was never about forgiveness. It was always about preserving himself. "I haven't done anything wrong," she replied evenly. "And I don't owe anyone an apology." She straightened her shoulders, eyes level. "I'm only 63. There's still plenty of life left in me. Richard Moore, whatever time I've got left, I'm done wasting it on you." She set the microphone down, turned and walked out of the ballroom without a glance back. The silence she left behind was suffocating. My father stood there, pale and motionless, as if he'd just been slapped in front of everyone. His hand trembled, still half raised, as though unsure whether to reach after her or hide. Later that night, back at the house, I was helping Mom pack her things when the front door creaked open. The key turned in the lock. My father came in, James following close behind him. He said nothing at first. Just walked to the bedroom doorway and watched Mom fold the last coat into her suitcase. Then he let out a sigh, barely a whisper. "Rachel, stop this nonsense. We're almost 70. At this point, what does any of this matter? Can't you just let me grow old in peace?" He paused, then added with a pointed tone, "Even if you don't care about me, at least think about Diana's reputation." Mom didn't look up. She kept folding a sweater, her hands calm and steady. He raised his voice, frustration starting to bleed through. "Do you really not see how much I love you? This is love." I couldn't hold it in anymore. A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. "Love?" I scoffed. "Is that what you call it, hiding behind snapshots with another woman?" He and Diana had been high school sweethearts. Dated for a year before heading to different colleges. Then he met my mom on campus. She was the student council president. Driven, charismatic. He said it was love at first sight. They dated 4 years. Got married right after graduation. Mom could have gone on to a corporate job, high pay, prestige, a real career. But he said, "I need you here with me. I'll be too lonely without you." So she stayed. He gave up that interview. That future. For him. She had given up so much over the years. And now she finally saw the truth. All that sacrifice had been for a man who preached love but never truly put her first. "I've said it already," she said, her voice steady, her spine straight. "I want a divorce." She paused, then stood tall and faced him fully. "I'll say it again so there's no misunderstanding. This isn't a whim and it's not a joke." James exploded like a kicked dog barreling forward. "Rachel, you are unbelievable. If you walk away from Dad, who the hell do you think is going to take care of you? No wonder he never stopped loving Diana. You're not even half the woman she is. You want to leave? Fine. But don't think you're taking a single cent from this house. You're disgusting." I laughed again. But this time it was colder, more hollow. Something deeper than anger. James is 6 years younger than me. He has no idea what Mom went through to bring him into this world. He nearly killed her during childbirth. It was a complicated delivery. The doctors recommended an emergency C-section. But Dad hesitated for over an hour before signing the consent form. "Let's wait a bit," he said. "Natural delivery is better for the baby." During that hour, Mom was in so much pain she nearly passed out. The doctors came in again and again urging him to sign. But he just sat in the waiting room, head down, flipping through conference notes. I was standing in the corner watching it all, his so-called calm logic. And it was the first time I realized I could never count on him. When James was born, he cried through the night, every night. The only way to keep him calm was to hold him, rock him, hum to him endlessly. And my mother? She stayed up with him night after night, barely sleeping. By day she cared for me. By night she sat on the living room couch, holding a fussy newborn in her arms until the sun came up. And my father? He claimed he needed academic focus. He closed the bedroom door and eventually moved into his faculty apartment on campus. It sounded noble, for the sake of scholarship. But really he just didn't want to hear his own son cry. Who would have thought that very son, all grown up now, wouldn't remember a thing she'd done for him? That he'd stand beside our father like a loyal guard dog, barking at her like she was the enemy? There was a flicker of grief in my mother's eyes. The child she had nearly died bringing into the world was now standing in front of her, pointing to the door, telling her to leave. Her whole life, who had she lived it for? I walked to her side, gently took her hand. "Mom," I whispered. "Come with me. I'll take you home." She looked at me, tears at the corners of her eyes, and then she smiled. "Just a little." "Okay," she said. She let go of my hand, turned to face my father, and spoke with calm finality. "Richard, if you won't agree to this, then I'll see you in court." My father's eyes, normally so refined and composed, suddenly burned with rage. He exploded. "Well, Rachel, you're really doing this, huh? Fine. I'll give you your damn divorce. But James is right. How are you going to survive without me?" Then he threw down the last card in his deck. "Don't come crawling back when you regret it." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the whole frame shook. Even his footsteps felt like thunder retreating down the hall. I took Mom back to my place. Ethan didn't look happy about it, but he didn't say a word. He knew better. This house wasn't his. I earned it. 10 years at a public accounting firm, grinding my way up. This was my roof. And under it my mother had every right to rest. A few weeks later, once my daughter was out of school for summer break, we packed up and hit the road. Mom had been trapped in that invisible prison of marriage for far too long. She needed air. She needed to see other skies, meet other people, live other lives, even for just a while. We went to Seattle and watched the mist roll over Mount Rainier. Then we drove south down the Pacific Coast Highway, sun pouring through the windshield, the ocean sparkling beside us. We drank cocoa in a pine cabin in Oregon. Took photos laughing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. For the first time in my life, I saw her laugh, truly laugh. Like it cost her nothing. Like it came from someplace deep and light and whole. On the last night of the trip, she sat by the hotel window, quietly organizing her purse. My phone buzzed. Dad's name lit up the screen. I handed it to her. She answered, held it to her ear, and didn't say a word. His voice came through, familiar and smug, as grating as ever. "Having fun?" She stared out at the night sky beyond the glass and answered, voice steady. "Yes. And I'd be having more fun if you hadn't called." There was a pause on the other end. A shift in tone. Then came his annoyed reply. "Rachel, don't be ridiculous. Your flight gets in tomorrow. Come straight home, you hear me? You're not some teenager running around. When you're back, I'll take you to see Diana. You can apologize to her. Otherwise, what are people gonna think? The moment I heard her name, my fists clenched. My jaw locked so tight I could feel it in my ears. But my mother? She just gave a soft, almost amused huff through her nose. Then she hung up, without saying a single word more. The moment we stepped back into the house, still shrugging off our coats, the smell hit us, rich, savory roasted chicken wafting in from the kitchen. Mom paused mid-step, her nose twitching instinctively as she turned toward the source. The kitchen light was on, steam curling upward from the stovetop. A figure moved behind the counter, clearly in the thick of cooking. But it wasn't my father. He hadn't so much as lifted a pan in decades. To him, the kitchen might as well have been another dimension, one he had no intention of entering. Cooking, in his view, was something that didn't belong in a man's timeline. But whoever this was, he moved with practiced ease, his chopping swift and clean. 2 dishes were already plated on the table. "Who's in there?" my mom asked, frowning slightly as she leaned forward for a better look. I shrugged with feigned surprise. "No idea." Just then a warm male voice called from the kitchen, "You're home?" Perfect timing. Everything's just about ready. Out stepped an older man, his hair a graceful silver gray, wearing a crisp button-down and a clean apron. He looked completely at ease, standing tall with a quiet elegance that didn't need to announce itself. Mom froze. Her eyes narrowed, squinting as if she were trying to be sure of what she was seeing. Then cautiously she asked, "Wait, are you Henry?" The man smiled, gentle and knowing, with a softness in his gaze. "It's been a long time, Rachel." She instinctively brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes instantly welling up. She couldn't speak at first. How are you here?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, full of disbelief. I watched them with a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Henry Collins, the man who'd called me 2 days ago. He was my mother's first love. Back in high school they'd secretly dated for a year. But my grandparents had been firmly against it. So they ended it. Not long after, my father came into the picture, full of charm and promises about security and a proper family. Henry went off to college in California, then to Germany for graduate school. He never married. No kids. Just a long, quiet life lived in his own way. Recently he heard through an old classmate what had happened at my father's birthday party. The public humiliation, the betrayal. That same night he booked a flight to Boston. He told me he didn't believe Rachel was the kind of woman who'd make a scene without reason. He got my number through a mutual friend. When he called, he sounded like a nervous teenager being called on in class. I thought it was a scam at first. But then he sent me a photo, grainy, faded, clearly scanned from decades ago. Mom stood at the edge of a high school basketball court, laughing into the camera, her head tilted toward a younger version of Henry, who looked straight into the lens with quiet, boyish sincerity. And just like that, I recognized it. That was her real smile. So I told him yes. Told him when we'd be back. Told him to wait. What I hadn't expected was that he'd show up early and cook an entire meal. "After all these years," he'd said while setting the table, "I just wanted her to walk in and taste something warm." He took her coat with a gentleness that felt like something sacred. Then he winked at me as if to scold me for not giving her a heads up, though the smile on his face was impossible to hide. Mom finally regained her composure and looked over at me. I nodded once, quietly, and nudged her toward the table. They sat down and began to talk. And to my surprise, it wasn't awkward at all. I'd expected long silences, maybe too many words trying to fill the years between them. But Henry was effortlessly charming, thoughtful in just the right places and never forced. Within 10 minutes he had her laughing. And not just polite chuckles, genuine, full-hearted laughter. It was the kind of laugh I remembered from when I was a kid. A laugh that wasn't weighed down. A laugh that didn't feel like it needed to apologize for existing. It was the sound of my mother finally exhaling. Everything was peaceful, until Ethan came home. He stood frozen in the entryway, staring at the full dinner table and the unfamiliar man sitting beside my mother. "Amy, Rachel, what's going on here?" he asked cautiously, his voice laced with suspicion. I turned to him, my tone steady and unapologetic. "This is Henry Collins. He's a friend of my mom's." Ethan's eyes darted between Henry and my mother, and his expression began to tighten. His brow furrowed in a way I'd seen far too many times, judgment wrapped in entitlement. Then he spoke, that familiar brand of passive-aggressive sarcasm dripping from every word. Rachel, you and Richard haven't officially divorced yet, right? To bring a man into the house like this, especially where people might see, that doesn't exactly look good, does it? The smile that had been dancing on my mother's face vanished. Her body stiffened and she glanced at Henry with uncertainty, shame creeping in. But before she could respond, Henry calmly set his wine glass down. His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. I think you've misunderstood, he said. I'm not here to stir up trouble. I came to cook dinner. Ethan scoffed. Sure. And I suppose you're also here to do the laundry? Come on. Let's not pretend this is just about food. What exactly are you trying to pull? That's enough, I cut in. My voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. What are you really upset about, Ethan? That someone actually treats my mother well? That she's not still waiting around for a man who never once made her a meal? Color rose in Ethan's face. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, too cowardly to finish his sentence. My mom didn't dignify the exchange with a reaction. Instead, she got up from her seat, walked into the kitchen and returned with a clean plate. She handed it to Henry with a lightness in her voice that made everything before it irrelevant. Would you mind getting me another bowl of soup? She asked. I ate too fast the first time. Didn't savor it. Henry looked at her with a warmth that filled the room. Of course. That meal Ethan barely touched a thing. He sat stiffly, chewed a few bites and muttered something about work before retreating to the study. But my mom? She ate like the food had a heartbeat. After dinner, she and Henry cleaned the kitchen together. I stayed in the living room listening to the sound of plates clinking and water running, like a scene from some soft, forgotten life. I think you just beat me at dishwashing, she teased. Then I guess you owe me a walk, Henry replied. Fine, she laughed. But if I get tired, you're carrying me. I'm hoping you do, he said. Gives me an excuse to keep you close. She didn't answer, but I heard her laugh again. Henry had just rinsed the last plate. The faucet hadn't even fully turned off when the doorbell rang. Who could that be at this hour? Mom asked, her brow tightening. Something dropped in my stomach. I stood up, but before I reached the entryway, the door thundered with 3 hard knocks. Rachel. Open up. It's me. Of course. My father. The door cracked open, and before anyone could react, he and James pushed inside, a gust of cold air chasing their heels. I knew it, Richard snapped, eyes scanning the room before locking onto Henry in the kitchen, a dish towel still in his hands. Well, that was fast, he spat. Didn't waste any time moving him in, did you? My mother stood by the dining room chair. She didn't move, didn't speak. You two aren't even legally divorced yet. James shouted, pointing accusingly at her. And you bring this guy into your home? What the hell are you doing? She knows exactly what she's doing, I said flatly. But Richard ignored me completely. His eyes were fixed on Henry, lips curling into a sneer. Henry, I remember you. The guy who dropped out of high school, ran off to Germany and still managed to come back with nothing to show for it. Henry didn't flinch. He quietly dried his hands and looked up with an unbothered calm. I'm surprised you remember me, he said mildly. Truly. Surprised. Richard stepped forward like he owned the moral high ground. Of course I remember. She never forgot you. And that's when my mother finally spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, like stone beneath a river. You're right, she said. I never did. Richard froze, his expression jolted. James, on the other hand, snapped instantly. Mom. Are you out of your mind? She turned to look at him, not angry, not hurt. Distant. There was a calm detachment in her eyes I had never seen before. Do you remember, she said quietly, how I used to hold you through the night when you were a baby? James fell silent. Do you remember how I walked you around the house for hours while you cried until the sun came up? His mouth opened, but no words came out. Your father was sleeping in the faculty dorms then. He said he was busy. Truth was, he just couldn't be bothered by the noise. I don't blame you for not knowing that as a child. But James, you're over 30 now. It's your responsibility to figure out who in your life you should never have turned on. James's face flushed deep red, his fingers trembling at his sides. And then Richard broke. His voice exploded with indignation. Rachel, have you no shame? You humiliated me in front of everyone at my birthday party. And now you're parading your old flame around in my house? What is this, revenge? My mother stared at him, her voice slow and razor-sharp. You spent 40 years tearing me down. All I did tonight was rip up the loan agreement. That's when Henry finally stepped forward. He'd been quiet the whole time, but now his voice carried, firm and unwavering. Richard, the problem is you've always seen her as an extension of yourself. Someone meant to orbit around you. But I saw her for what she really is. A woman who was meant to shine. Richard's anger flared. His laugh was bitter, mocking. Don't play saint now. You're just a lonely old man no one ever wanted. You really think she came back to you because she loves you? She's pitying you. Henry didn't blink. He met Richard's stare with quiet resolve. I never married because from the beginning I was only ever waiting for her. He paused. Even if it was just to hear her ask, would you still make me a cup of tea? My mother's breath caught. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. She took a step forward and for the first time stood beside Henry. I'm asking now, she said softly. I still would. The silence that followed was complete. Even the slow drip of water from the kitchen sink sounded like thunder. I looked at my father. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked like a king who had just realized his kingdom no longer existed. His mouth opened but nothing came out. Because for the first time in his life he wasn't just embarrassed, he wasn't in control. He turned and walked slowly toward the door, shoulders heavy. James followed behind him, wordless. At the threshold my father paused and looked back one final time. You've gone this far, he said, voice low. Don't regret it. My mom smiled, gentle but immovable. I won't, she said. The door shut behind them. The world went quiet. She turned to Henry, eyes bright, her voice still touched with uncertainty. That tea you mentioned, do you still remember what kind I like? Henry gave a soft smile. Jasmine green. 2 slices of lemon. When Mom left my house, she did it with the same calm clarity she'd gained that night. She didn't take much. Just a few of her favorite clothes, a couple of books, and a small wooden box filled with her tea set. She looked at Henry, lifting the box into the back seat with a half-teasing grin. The kitchen's yours now. Don't let me go hungry. Henry gave her a mock salute. Yes, ma'am. They moved to a quiet little town near the coast. A white house with an attic, nestled by the ocean. A place untouched by expectations, where no one treated her like a maid or a burden. Every morning she sat in the backyard with the sun on her face. In the afternoons she volunteered at the local library, reading stories to children. Sometimes she'd send me photos. One of her and Henry smiling in front of the farmer's market. One of them riding old bicycles by the lake. And one, just one, of her standing with her back to the camera, wrapped in a light blue shawl, her hair loosely pinned up as the sun set behind her on a field of grass. There was no long caption. Just a single sentence. I never knew you could have a first time in your 60s. On the other side of town my father's life was unraveling, day by day, piece by piece. He started calling me constantly. First it was about Mom. He wanted to talk. He said he was ready to start over. I ignored him. Then he got sneakier, reaching out to Henry's neighbors trying to check in, pretending he was just worried she might be taken advantage of. Eventually he pushed James forward. James texted me. Amy, how's Mom? Is she doing okay? Has she mentioned me? I replied with one sentence. You don't deserve to know. That's when they realized they were losing their grip. Richard had assumed Mom's walkout was just a tantrum, a tactic to scare him straight. But when it finally hit him that she wasn't coming back, the panic of losing control stripped away the last of his pride. He started volunteering at academic conferences, begging for speaking slots, trying to claw back some relevance. But he'd been out of teaching for too long. Students whispered that he was dated, condescending, out of touch. His evaluations slipped year after year. As for James, rumors began to spread at his firm. Anonymous complaints claimed he'd been using his position for personal gain. And the thing about Richard and Diana? It had already made the rounds. People didn't say it aloud, but everyone knew something exploded at that birthday dinner. Old friends started keeping their distance. Then came the diagnosis, early-stage Parkinson's. The doctor told him he'd need regular care. He nodded. And then he did what I knew he would, he called my mother. He even tried email. One after another, long winding letters. The tone was softer now, more careful. And one he wrote. Rachel, I was wrong. If you'd come back, I'll let go of everything else. Mom read the emails. She didn't respond to a single one. As spring approached, Henry and Mom helped organize a small community exhibit titled, Act 2, Life Rewritten. It was warm and welcoming, walls lined with watercolor paintings by local seniors, children's poems she helped them write, and hand-cut leaves pinned to a giant tree of life, made from recycled paper scraps. Henry made a display card for the entrance. Welcome to the days where we begin again. I brought my daughter with me to visit. And there, standing near the back of the crowd, head low under a cap, was James. He watched silently as Mom knelt beside a little boy, explaining how each leaf on the tree represented a moment someone decided to grow again. His eyes were distant, unfocused, like he was seeing her for the first time. As the event wound down, he quietly stepped next to me. She really changed, he murmured. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. No, I said. She finally got the chance to be who she always was. James looked down like the truth of that had just landed. That night, before we left, I saw Mom on the balcony outside the event space. She was wrapped in a soft shawl, and Henry handed her a cup of freshly steeped tea. She took it with both hands, lifted her gaze to the stars, and said, "Today was really nice." Henry stepped a little closer, his voice low. "Every day can be nice, if you let it." She turned to him and smiled just slightly, then gave the smallest nod. Then she looked out past the trees, toward the blinking lighthouse in the distance. Its beam flickered steadily, like it was lighting a path she'd never dared walk before. "I'm done wasting time being angry," she said. "I just want to live well. And be loved well." Henry smiled. "You deserve that." She nodded again, no hesitation, no fear. She was truly free. Richard and Rachel's divorce was finalized in the fading days of winter. He'd assumed, no, expected, that she would do what she always did, turn back at the last minute. She had a soft heart. He'd counted on that for 40 years. But this time she didn't look back. This time there was no softness left for him. She didn't even show up to sign. Her attorney handled everything. What she left him with was a box of old photo albums, and the soundless echo of a goodbye that had taken 4 decades to say. A few months later, Richard married Diana. It was a modest ceremony, attended by a few colleagues and aging alumni. Diana wore a pale slate blue dress. She stood on the platform with a composed smile, but beneath it was a flicker of something else. Something like victory, long awaited and slightly bitter. She had waited so long. And now, at last, she had the title. At first, it felt like they were making up for lost time. They moved into a quiet home in the suburbs. They tried baking. They planted a garden. Diana even floated the idea of writing a marriage memoir, a chronicle of their belated fate. Richard smiled along, though he spoke less and less. He began to realize Diana didn't like silence. Every day had a plan, down to the color-coded fruit trays at breakfast. She didn't adapt to him. She corrected him. "The sleeves on that sweater need a wash. Could you please drop the lecture voice?" He began to feel tired. Not physically, but down in his bones. Diana loved taking selfies. She loved tagging him on social media, hosting dinner parties, calling him, "my husband who once won the Chancellor's Award," with pride glowing on her face. But in private she became sharp. Prickly. Once he was watching an old recording of Rachel giving a lecture. Diana walked in, silently closed the iPad and said, "What's past is past. No need to revisit it." In that moment, Richard felt something cold drop inside him. He'd escaped Rachel's restraint, only to step into a cage made of polished brass. Less than a year into the marriage, he was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. Diana didn't abandon him. She administered his pills, arranged his appointments, made spreadsheets. But she never held his hand. She never hugged him anymore. She cared for him like a nurse, not a wife. As the disease progressed, Richard grew slower, less precise. Sometimes he would wake from dreams and swear he could smell oranges. He'd see Rachel in the kitchen of their old home, peeling clementines in soft spirals, stacking the peels into neat mounds. She never complained. One night, sleepless and restless, he dug through old emails, rereading what he had left. He knew he'd deleted most of her messages over the years. He knew his replies had always been shorter than hers. In the mirror, his reflection stared back, faded, hollow-eyed, rimmed with gray. He whispered aloud to himself. What is it that you really wanted? Freedom. He had it. Control. He'd wielded it. But it had cost him the one thing he never imagined he'd lose. There was no one left waiting for him to come home. James rarely visited now. Ever since Rachel walked away, something between father and son had fractured. At first James was furious. Furious at his mother for destroying the structure of their family. Furious that she left him in the middle, expected him to choose. But as time passed, his anger quieted. He began to notice things. Diana never really asked how he was. When his father's condition worsened, James watched her stand at the bedroom door, hesitating for several seconds before finally stepping inside. He remembered how Rachel used to warm milk for him when he couldn't sleep, how she had quietly supported him through every failure without once saying, "I told you so." One afternoon James stopped by unexpectedly. He found Richard sitting alone on the patio staring at nothing, a blanket across his knees. The TV was off. "Dad," he said quietly, "do you ever regret it?" Richard didn't respond. He just handed over an old photograph. Rachel standing in front of their college library, arms full of books, laughing toward the sky. James stared at it for a long time. "She's not waiting for you," he said eventually. Richard nodded, his eyes fluttering shut. "I know." Diana never left Richard. She just talked less. Went to bed earlier. Spent more time with her own circle of friends. She still scheduled his follow-ups, managed his prescriptions. But she no longer asked if he wanted tea. She no longer tried to sit beside him and fill the silence. This man, this hard-won prize she had fought half her life for, wasn't the man she thought he'd be. He was just a shadow now. A shadow with his back turned, always looking toward someone else.